All right, so I want to welcome Dr. Judy Grahn, poet, writer, cultural theorist, teacher of many and thousands across many years. She's had a tremendous impact on many people's lives, and I'm so glad you were able to make time for this today. Thanks, Judy.
Well, thank you, Deborah.
And so we start with the question of how you see paradigm shift, how you define it, where it sits with you.
I think I'd have to say that I start off what I don't think of it. I don't think of it as a violent revolution uh, necessitating overthrow of governments and that sort of thing, but rather as whatever would work to include um, people who are excluded or oppressed by the current stories that exist, which would include myself as an LGBT person, um, and my family and many people that I love. So and creatures as well, the way that animals are understood in mass culture. So and the way consciousness is understood. So
Mm-hmm.
it it in other words, it comes from personal experience, my life experience, um, which has unraveled in so many different directions that it has kept me spinning to answer what I think is going to be your second question of how have I addressed any of this is as a poet and through my writing and belonging to different communities and different movements, including starting with LGBT movement in 1965, picketing the White House with Washington Mattachine Society, um, and then starting to write into the issues that I could see. I attended also an African American college, and as a white person, it was unusual to do that at that time, and it was very informative to me as I was raised in a just casually white racist family, um, a white supremacist family. So all kinds of issues, including mental illness and just all kinds of issues, being working class, so class, race, caste, and uh, and being sexually different
Right.
has informed me. So I started writing. I can go back and look at all of my writing, and it's by now long. It's 55 years of writing that includes 16 books
Mm-hmm.
and two pretty serious chapbooks,
Mm-hmm.
um, and numerous articles and so on, many talks
Mm-hmm.
that I can look at what it is that I've done in the way of trying to help provide replacement origin stories, is how I think about them.
Yes.
When origin stories go wrong,
Mm-hmm.
what do we do? And to me, they go wrong in religion, they go wrong in anthropology, they go wrong um, in the ways that mass culture constructs hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. So,
Yeah.
so these movements informed my work, and I also helped found
Thank
a
you.
couple of them.
Yes.
Gay Women's Liberation, which was so idealistic. We wanted to change the world for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that remains there as a kind of star in the sky to look at. Um, and cultural feminism, which I helped very much contributed to, and women's spirituality. In
Mm-hmm.
addition to continuing to research LGBT issues
Mm-hmm.
on psychology, but also on um, how gay people, as like if you call them that broadly, how transgender and how lesbians and so on have been seen in cross culturally and over time. to see that, oh, there are alternatives to, the biblical injunction against us that we're not sacred, and the psychological that we're not sane. And those were those have been challenged. Those kinds of ideas have been challenged, and I have contributed to that with like Another Mother Tongue in 1984, Gay Words, Gay Worlds, which really did talk about roles of gay people, and that's a change of origins story
Yes,
right there to do that.
yes. And I was going to ask
Um,
you about that because I think that's been one of your other biggest contributions is giving us a new origin story. So
yes,
please tell us a bit more
so
about that.
it looks to me as if I've done it in small pieces, at least repeatedly, uh,
Mhm,
over for various subjects over time,
mhm,
and but it culminated in an interest I took early on in joining up with feminist movement, and interest in researching the subject of menstruation, asking the question, how did women contribute to culture? And after 20 years of working with that, realizing that it was possible to put a story together that was viable, that could be researched, that was congruent even with much of Darwin, not all of it, but some of it, um, that could show that not only women contributed to culture, but that actually menstrual rituals and the related blood rituals that the males around them took on actually created human culture. So that is, whoa,
Yes.
that's really a new origin story. And it spins out, it continues to spin out in a number of directions, helping me describe and understand human differences, um, and putting in in a central place all of the genders,
Mhm,
so it doesn't replace men, but it does include women, and it includes all of the genders that are non-binary, or that are on a continuum,
mhm,
um, or that cross over.
mhm,
So I'm thrilled with that, because it just has continued to spin out, and I'm continuing to write about it and to discover new pieces about it. Overlaps with another piece that I took on of researching um, a, a goddess of mainstream mass culture who just seems to parallel uh, the trajectory of the male deities. And I called her Helen to begin with, Helen of Troy or of Sparta, and then realized that she comes forward to current times, and she also goes backward to the great goddess Inanna of Mesopotamia. These ancient Sumerians, 4,400 years ago, 4,300, wrote about her, and they actually, from what has been unearthed, wrote more poetry to her than to any of their other great deities.
mhm.
So she sustained and just continued even after Sumer subsided as a culture and was replaced by Babylon and the Akkadians and the Assyrians, and so on.
Mhm.
Um, and that all of this that seems so all over the map, uh, is starting to look like there's there are so many overlaps of um, mental health and oppression, um, of patriarchy and bad childhood rearing, and hierarchies of race and class, um, that overlap with this other one that looks like it's totally different, that I call metaformic theory. Um, I don't know if I'm being coherent here or if I'm
Are absolutely,
scrambling everything up, but the
absolutely.
menstrual research turned into something that I call metaformic theory, actually an embodied philosophy.
Yes.
And the more I work with it, the more usable it seems, and the more it shows up in other aspects of my work.
Yes, and as some of your colleagues, including me, have said and observed, this has become long ago more than a theory but a philosophy, and we
Yes,
teach it and talk about it as such. And I think, of course, aside from its importance for women, in terms of our own history, it is an alternative origin story to war, and that's what you've written about. And I think that's also a key piece. So I just
yes,
want to close
that's
with,
right.
yeah,
That yeah,
yeah.
we're we're ritual beings. Um, that's who we are. This helps us understand so many things about ourselves. I honestly, as soon as it fell out and I understood enough of it, I understood things about men and women that I had never
Mm,
thought that I would never understand,
mm,
that they would always be a mystery to me. And then since then, it has just gravitated into more and more consciousness and a capacity to be liberatory, as you're saying. If if we could absorb this, we would understand that there are very, very peaceful rituals that human beings have developed to um, d- deal with understanding each other. And we can develop even more because we have such incredible tools now um, that would enable us to leave war behind. But it will take some effort because war is a ritual and it's very important uh, for men to develop a sense of being men. So
mm,
that has to be addressed. How do you be a man without going to war? How does a country assert dominance if it has set out to do that
mm,
um, without resorting to war?
mm.
So however, there's just a toolbox full of other kinds of rituals that can be used. And the more that women step forward and assert themselves as not as having been oppressed all lo these many millions of years, but rather as having been central to the development of humanity itself as culturally different from all the other creatures in very particular ways, and assert their power, which is quite real, whether it's any more said to be menstrual or whatever it's said to be,
Mhm.
um, the more we can imagine a more peaceful world, I believe.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.